Welcome to Lydia's Plate. I'm a stay-at-home mom who is homesteading together with my husband and 4 kids. We do gardening, house cleaning, all the homesteading stuff, baking bread, experimenting with gluten-free foods for one of our kids, animals, and the like. So if you like that kind of stuff, stay tuned and welcome to our channel. If you are not familiar with meal planning, if you are used to going shopping every day for your groceries for supper, or even once a week, even once every 2 weeks, the longer that you go without shopping, the more prepared you'll be for this, and the less work you'll have in order to figure out what you all need. But as time goes on, you build up a stock, and you don't have to replenish so much in your pantry every time anymore. So there are a lot of dry goods that I'll buy in bulk, and then I don't have to purchase them for a long time again, like rice. A big huge box of minute rice will last us for months and months. And then also picking good containers to store that in so that you don't have food spoiling. That's a big thing. So if you don't really have much of a pantry, this may be a bit of a daunting task to start, but just start with small steps. Do you bake? What kinds of things do you like to bake? What are the most crucial or common ingredients for those baking days or meal prep days? One thing that I've done to make it a lot easier for myself is in the front of my main dish area of my binder, I've made myself lists of all the different meals that we like to eat. Now this is really, really old already. This is probably at least 6 years old, maybe older, and so there are a lot of things on here that maybe necessarily aren't our favorites anymore, or a lot of things that just haven't been added on. Normally I would sit down with my kids and my husband and we would meal plan. Often actually Mark is not here for this because he's at work, so it's just me and the kids. But I always tell them, one of the rules in our house is if you don't help meal plan, don't complain about what's on the meal plan. If you want to have your favorite, then you need to be there to voice that. If that's not important to you, don't complain about what you get fed. Generally, it's not a big deal because most of our kids aren't that picky, and the things that they are picky about, they can easily pick out because they're not super picky. For the most part, we do all like a lot of the same things, so that does make things a lot easier. For the purpose of today's video though, the kids are not going to be in it because for one, they don't really care to be in the video, and two, it'd be a lot louder with them here. Let's just be real, it would be. So I'm going to go according to this list. Another thing that has helped and would help if life was normal at this point would be to know when you have stuff up, because you're going to want to meal plan according to that, because you need to know how much time you're going to have to make a meal. So right about now our schedules are all pretty empty. Everything's kind of been kiboshed, nothing's happening, so then I have a lot of time. But at the same time, for example, the other day I did a baking day. So if I'm doing a baking day, that means I don't want to meal plan something that's gonna need hours on end to bake in the oven. That just wouldn't work. Some things can kind of work if you don't mind baking them at the same time, but if I'm having a baking day, I don't want to be thinking about my supper in the oven at the same time as all the different things that I'm baking. So there would be that to take into account, but that's small beans, it's not a big deal. I often meal plan for a month at a time just because that's about how often I go shopping, and it's different for us too because we've kind of been living this homesteading lifestyle for several years now already. I think going on 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. I've always had a garden. There was only 1 year, which was our second year of marriage, third year? Anyways, shortly in the beginning of our marriage, I did not have a garden for 1 year because I did push myself really hard and didn't give myself any grace with our first child. Had a garden that year anyways, and then she ended up being colicky, and it was exhausting dealing with a colicky child up at night almost 24/7, barely sleeping, half-hour naps at a time if she slept. And so then I said if that was the case with the next child, I was not having a garden. The next child was way easier, and I was kicking myself for not having had a garden. So I've tweaked that over the years. As we had kids, I would plant whatever I wanted to plant and deal with it as the time came and not stress. If I didn't get everything done the way I wanted, no big deal, at least the option was there. And there were always friends and family who were willing to take the extras. So it was not a big deal. Some people would say that was wasted time. It was worth it to me because then at least I knew it was there if I needed it, and what I could all get done and harvested, that already saved me a lot at the grocery store. So if you don't have a garden and if you don't raise any of your own animals, you are going to have a lot more to think of, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. It can totally be done. You're just going to have to get into the habit of considering those things. So for example, we slaughter our own poultry, we slaughter our own pork. So we have a lot of that in the freezer still. We also have our own laying hens, so I don't have to think about buying eggs. That helps a lot as well. I'm going to start off with meal planning here. We're at the beginning of April, and I'm just going to quickly fly through this and see what I come up with. Another thing that sometimes helps me with meal planning is having a list of my meats. Sometimes instead of like here I have made lists of the entire meal, but sometimes it helps me more to have lists of my different meat options, my different side options, and then like a salad vegetable. So sometimes that helps me more to try to figure out what we're hungry for or what I want to make. So now that I have all my meal planning done, the next thing I need to do is go through here, and a lot of these things I know the recipes in my head already because I make them quite often, but sometimes it has been good for me to just double check anyways to make sure that I'm not forgetting about something, especially like these ham rolls. It's been a long time since I've made them, but at the same time they're pretty easy. So I know I'm gonna have everything. The pizza crust, though, I can easily make myself. The ham is in the freezer. Cheese is in the fridge. I have everything for the sauce, which is just butter, brown sugar, Worcestershire sauce, poppy seeds. I have all of that. So things like that, you'll just have to go through and figure out if you need anything special for them. This is where if you have a stocked pantry, you may not need to go get a whole lot of ingredients to now make your meal plan. For ham rolls, I would need ham, cheese, pizza dough, so that means flour, oil, salt, yeast, water. And then the sauce. So that is poppy seeds, brown sugar, butter, Worcestershire sauce. So then the next thing would be the Salisbury steaks. So for Salisbury steaks, I need a package of ground beef, and I need breadcrumbs, egg, ketchup, soup base,
over my Salisbury steaks. And for the mashed potatoes, we would also need more butter and milk. And the corn is in the freezer. But we'll write that on here. So now for pizza, again, we need everything for that pizza dough, which I have lots of. And then we have both ham and pepperoni in the freezer. We have the cheese. I have peppers in the freezer if we want to put peppers on our pizza. I have pineapple. So when you go through all your meal planning now like this, and then you write down all the things, so now it's easy to see. I know I have ground beef in the freezer, breadcrumbs. Well, I have so much bread in the freezer because I just did a big bread baking day, all kinds of different bread things. So I know that I would have breadcrumbs, and I have croutons as well. So I've often just blended up some croutons and thrown them in there, which I think I actually do have some blended croutons in the freezer as well right now. So I might just use those up. Eggs again, we have our laying hens, so I know I have eggs. Ketchup, I have ketchup. I just opened a new tin the other day, which fills up 3 ketchup bottles, so I know I have ketchup. Onion soup base, I know I have that because the last time I went shopping, I stocked up. I think I got 4 boxes. And then salt and pepper, something that I always kind of have. A Worcestershire sauce, that's a big bottle. It goes for a long time. Mustard powder, that's also something that I buy at once and I know I'm good for months. Onions I have, butter I have, milk I have, corn is in the freezer. So then here, going on to the pizza, a lot of these things, let's go take a look at my pantry so that you kind of get an idea of all the things that I keep stocked up on. So here's my pantry, and I keep stocked up on a lot of things. So I always have, always till I run out, but I have things like a big jug of vanilla extract, so I can always refill my smaller bottles. We just picked up a case of mushroom soup again the other day, so I know I'll be good for a long time. Now, because of not wanting to go shopping at the store even less often, preferably, if we can hold off with drinking milk, if we don't need milk for drinking, we could go a long time with this skim milk powder, because then I can just reconstitute a cup of milk or 2 cups of milk, whatever I need for baking. For baking, I find this is totally doable. And you're not going to notice any flavor from here. When I first mix it up, it does have a little bit of a different flavor, so I don't know that I want to drink it. I've heard it can work, but at this point it doesn't interest me. If I'm going to drink milk, I want to drink the milk in the jug, which is things like that. So then I also have evaporated milk. I have some beans here still. I have some cans of mushrooms. I did buy some mushrooms as a special treat for making some resurrection rolls for the kids for Easter. And I just keep stocked up on all kinds of things. I've got coconut oil down here, I've got croutons, I've got stuffing, I've got lots of peanut butter, I've got a lot of molasses, I have a big pail of honey. I don't even know, this hasn't even been opened yet, but we will open it the next time we need honey. I have a lot of mayonnaise, because that's something that I use a lot of to quickly make a homemade dip, a homemade vegetable dip, or ranch to go with maybe like spicy chicken to dip it into, or to make a spicy, what do they call that, spicy mayo to go with sweet potato fries, stuff like that. So I have mayo on hand, or Caesar dressing. This is what I use for Caesar dressing as well. So I just keep well stocked on a lot of these things. All of these boxes of the onion soup mix. I've got extra cornstarch. I've got extra baking powder. Down here in the bottom, I've got multiple jugs of vinegar and boxes of baking soda, so I'm good for cleaning. I have some oil just for cooking. We do use a lot of lard for everything. I have all my spices. refill packages, things like that. So I don't have to buy that again. Poppy seeds. And then there are spices that I use even more than those. So here, for example, I have a big thing of dried minced garlic. I've got a big container of parsley, black pepper, cinnamon, garlic powder, just all kinds of things. I'll buy bulk spices like this because they last for a long time. So we also have quite a bit of coffee left, so we're good on coffee. I did buy some drink mix crystals for the kids just as something else and to also help the milk stretch longer right about now. They're totally fine with drinking water, but sometimes it's just nice to have something else. So if we have it, we can do that. We've also been experimenting with making homemade iced tea from like tea. Making tea and adding lemon juice and sugar. Making homemade iced tea like that. Oh wow, what else? I've got an extra container of mustard back there. I've got lemon juice, barbecue sauces, soy sauce. Generally my rule is anything that I see here, if I pull the last one out, or if it's something that I know I use a lot of, say the mushroom soup. So when I see that I'm getting down to my last 5 cans of mushroom soup, that item goes on my list. So then I've got this running list of groceries, and then once it gets big enough that I'm either till my $250 mark that I'll probably get the free item or the deal at Superstore, then that will sometimes determine when I go. Yeah. So anytime that I see I'm running low, I'll just write it on there. So for different things, it does change. When I get to my last bottle of soy sauce, that's when soy sauce goes on the list. So it depends on how often I use an item as to at what point it gets written on the shopping list. Pasta, I've got a lot of the pastas up here. Icing sugar, I have this container, and that's not something I stock a whole lot of. I probably should be writing that on my grocery list. That way the next time I go to town, I pick up a bag of icing sugar just so that I don't run out. The whole point of that is not to hoard, but that way if I'm always stocking up, then if, say I'm 2 weeks into my 4 weeks before I go shopping again, then I've got a backup. Then I've got a refill. So that's the whole point. It's not necessarily that that's what I'm going to need for my meal plans for that month, but that way if I need to make something spur of the moment, like let's say this coronavirus thing was not happening and we were gonna go out somewhere, you know, that way if I needed to quickly make a dessert to take away, I would have whatever I needed to whip something up spontaneously. I also have bags of both the Quick Oats oatmeal and the oat flakes. So those are also things, because we make a lot of homemade breakfasty type things, the granola bars, baked oatmeal, things like that. Those are also items I don't want to run out of. So let's push this out of the way. So if I buy a big bag of the quick cooking oats and I fill the whole bag into this container and I go throw that bag in the garbage, that's when I will go write cooking oats or quick oats onto my shopping list, because that way by the time I go shopping, this is going to be a lot emptier already, but I won't have run out. Quick Oats oatmeal, that's also something that I'll use in things like the Salisbury steak if I don't have breadcrumbs, don't have croutons, something like that, or if I'm making burgers. Oatmeal is something I throw in there as a binding or thickening agent, you know, something to kind of help hold everything together. So I don't want to run out of oatmeal for that reason either. Coconut oil is super handy to have on hand as well. For a lot of things, if I happen to not have butter, coconut oil is a good substitute. Sometimes our experiments don't always work out. For example, a while ago, I made cooked carrots, and I'll often put a little bit of butter and brown sugar over that, and that's just a 1-to-1
ratio of your butter to your brown sugar as to how much goes over. So probably a good start would be, if I'm making enough cooked carrots for the 6 of us, I would start with a 1/4 cup of butter and a 1/4 cup of brown sugar and mix that in over the carrots. So I had tried coconut oil over the carrots last time. That was not something that we would gravitate to. Maybe some people would like that. That was not something that tickled our fancy. So that would be an experiment where it did not work. But for cookies, to quickly whip up some chocolate chip cookies, this works very well in place of butter. Sometimes I'll even do half coconut oil, half lard, and that way I have the butter for things like toast. I don't want to be spreading coconut oil or lard on my toast. So that way I can save the butter for those things where it really absolutely has to be butter. Again, if I am missing anything, feel free to ask me in the comments below or anything. I've done this for so long already that there are probably steps that I do that I don't even realize anymore that I do, because it just comes so naturally to me already. So now here is another idea of the shopping list. So as I run out of things in the pantry, I will just write them down here. And then when I rewrite this onto a piece of paper to take grocery shopping, then I'll write it down in the order of how I run through the store. So for the most part, say our local Superstore or Walmart, for the most part, I know in which order I'm going to run through the store. So I know if I go to Superstore, I am going to be going down the cereal aisle first, and that's where, if I had the oatmeal on here, that's where I would be finding the oatmeal. Right after that aisle, I know, is the baking aisle, so that's where I would find the molasses, the sugar, the flour, the yeast. And then after that, I believe the next aisle of the things that are on here would be the mushroom soup, and then the Ziploc bags, and then let's see, am I missing anything here? And then the dog food is the last one, and from there I would head off to the breads, if there was anything I was going to get in the bread section, which for the most part I totally skip the bread section. There generally isn't anything I'm buying there unless I want to treat myself to bagels, because that's something I have not attempted to make yet. Also, I have my flour and sugar bins down here. Each of those bins holds an entire bag, like a 10 kg bag of sugar or a 10 kg bag of flour. So for example, right now, the other day I did a day where I just baked all kinds of bread items, things that you'd find at the bakery section. So I used up almost an entire bag of flour getting bread items ready and done for in the freezer. So I know that that's down here, and as soon as I start getting halfway through one of those tubs, the sugar not so much. The sugar, once I'm down to the last quarter, then I'll write that on the list, and the flour, once I'm down to half, I'll write that on the list, because I know if I all of a sudden need to make a lot of bread or buns or something, I can go through that flour pretty quickly. Each recipe of bread or bun dough, because it's the same recipe, each recipe uses 9 to 10 cups of flour. So then I know if I suddenly have to make bread or buns, I'm going to go through a lot of flour. So that's why as soon as I'm down to half of my container, I will write that on the list. The other thing is I have a good store here of other spices. So I have seasoning mixes that I make. I make my own chili seasoning, and then I write on there how much I like to use for when I make chili. I do that also with taco seasoning, pumpkin pie spice, apple pie spice, ranch dressing, like this one. This is all mixed up, and I have the recipe written right on there to make it super easy for me to know if I need to make some ranch dressing, that's what I need to do, that's how much I need in there. So that makes it simple. And then I've got a lot of other spices in here. So here I have like this pink Himalayan salt. I've got my big container of cornstarch, baking powder, baking soda, all those kinds of things. So another big thing that helps is if you're growing your own vegetables. I've had friends who have lived in apartments and have had balconies, and they have grown vegetables in like Rubbermaid tubs out on their balconies. 5-gallon pails. I've heard you can grow potatoes in there. I've never done it because I've just never needed to. I have a big yard where I can have a big garden, so I've just never needed to do that. But I've heard that those things can work. It just depends how much you're willing to do it. Another thing is our freezers. So with growing all our own vegetables, then we also can harvest and store and prepare, freeze, can, all those kinds of things. So like in fall, you know, I made a lot of videos on canning pickles and salsa, things like that. So that saves me a lot from having to buy. Almost all the vegetables, unless I'm making a fresh salad, I don't have to buy any vegetables for all my meal planning because I know I have corn in the freezer. I know I have beans in the freezer. We did freezer inventory, cleaned out the freezers, got them all sorted again and everything, and so I found out I still had packages of kohlrabi, whereas we thought we were out because things were just getting messy in there over time, especially with having 2 freezers. You know, as things come from the garage into the house, other things get buried. We also thought we were out of Saskatoons. We thought we were out of chopped apples in the freezer, and we found all of that too. So it's also important, if you're going to start doing these kinds of things, to check it out every, I don't know, 4 to 6 months, and just kind of know where you're at, know what you have left. And that way also, especially with the meats, you want to be checking for if any bags have unsealed. My veggies and fruits, I don't vacuum seal because I'm often going to go in there and just scoop out, you know, if I'm making blueberry muffins, I'm going to need a cup of blueberries, Saskatoons, whatever you want to call them. I know some people are very particular, there's a difference, so sorry, that's kind of an interchangeable word to me. But, so I'm not going to vacuum seal those because I'm going to be going into those bags a lot. But our meats, if I find a package of meat that has unsealed, either with being thrown around in the freezer, because we're not always as gentle with everything as we should be. It's frozen, we're busy, we're working, we're just trying to dig through and find the next meat that we want. Sometimes things get tossed around and these bags are not 100%. They can break, especially with things like a whole chicken. The bones from where you've cut off the head of the chicken on the neck, those bones can be very sharp, and sometimes those will cause a bag to unseal because they'll pop a hole in the bag. So if I find things like that, if I find packages, or just with vacuum sealing, you know, if you don't stretch the bag tight, if you don't do it right, and you have wrinkles in your seal, it might look like it's sealed that day when you're doing it. You think, okay, that worked, that seal is fine. And then a few months down the road, you'll find, oh, wait a second, I have a bag here that's unsealed because that seal actually wasn't good enough. So as I'm going through the freezer, if I find packages like that, that will determine my meal plan as well. We were just through the freezers 2 weeks ago, so I kind of know where I'm at. We've used up all those types of items already in the last 2 weeks, so that's why I didn't do it here in this meal planning. Another thing is beans. So here we go. I have just cooked up a big batch of homemade baked beans. And this now, you know, I might leave some in the fridge for one more meal worth, and then we can eat them. And then the rest I'll put in 1 or 2 cup containers and throw into the freezer. And then when I'm making chili, I can take that container of beans out in the morning already if I know I'm making chili, and leave it in the fridge or even on the counter, and then it will be thawed enough that when I'm actually making the chili for supper, I can throw that right in there, and that'll just give an extra boost of flavor to my chili that wouldn't be in there otherwise. So things like that can really help out too for bringing flavor to your dishes. I hope you found this video inspirational and helpful. If there's anything that you feel I didn't explain well enough, feel free to ask me in the comments. I really want to be able to help people out with this if this is something that just seems so daunting to them or just so unfamiliar. You know, I want to be able to help you out with that because this is something I've done for so long that I think I take for granted some of the things that I've learned along the way, and I may miss passing those things on. It doesn't have to be a big scary thing to go several weeks without going to the store. You just have to get into a rhythm and know what to look for, what kinds of things you're going to need on a daily or weekly basis,
And sometimes just knowing how long things can store or what can go into the freezer. Like if the cheese is on sale, you can buy a block of cheese and throw it in the freezer. That totally works. So just learning those kinds of tricks that you can do to help yourself be sustainable at home for longer, that can really help as well. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye guys!